Greetings and blessings from the south suburbs of Chicago, and welcome to the Calvary Baptist Church of Glenwood, where the lost can be found, where the dying can receive life, and where the saints can be encouraged.
The Church of Love. Welcome to the Church of Love. The Church of Love. Welcome to the Church of Love.
Greetings, beloved. I pray that this message finds you well. I pray that all who hear this message, wherever life may find you in this moment, that you do know that you are still able and capable of living in that harmonious presence with the Lord our God, even in times of difficulty, even in times of sickness, even in times of pain, even in times that are seemingly uncertain, but we are certain of this one thing, that our God is present with us and our God's grace is sufficient, and that He never leaves us, and that He's with us. As we find ourselves in this third Sunday of Advent and soon approaching the high holy day of Christmas, I find myself looking back at the year 2020, as I'm sure so many of us have been, and as we continue to reflect upon this year. Jokingly, I even saw where one person described this is now the 55th month of the year 2020, and at times it has certainly felt that way. Just by virtue of you being able to view this message and listen to me right now, I have no doubt that this means that you made it through 2020, not without incident, not without difficult times, not without times of struggle, not without times of even sickness and peril, but through all of that, you have made it to the end of this year. Through all of that together, we have made it this far. And so while the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke certainly seem like the most obvious choices for the selection of a text for Christmas, this year, in light of all that has been, in light of all that is, and with hopefulness, in light of all that shall be, I find myself reflecting upon the wisdom literature. I find myself reflecting upon the nearly 300,000 Americans who begin this year and who began in January with so much hope and health. Those 300,000 Americans are no longer with us, not on this side of mortality, not on this side of eternity. I think about the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, men, women, and children, who began January 2020 with hopefulness, with a confident outlook, and then through matters with whom the force of gravity and the historical presence and also the lack of precedent in terms of what we've all faced so overwhelmingly, much like a tsunami of pressure and pain and anxiety, began to ravage and absolutely dismantle normalcy as we knew it. I think about the hundreds and hundreds of thousands and thousands of men, women, and children whose lives dissipated over the course of this year. Some due to the coronavirus, some due to injustices experienced both domestically here in the United States and throughout the world. Some due to a lack of access to those resources that would enable them and allow them to be able to live a quality of life that would have allowed them to reach this very moment and reach this very day. And so in looking over all of that and praying upon all of that, I also found myself reflecting upon a sermon that Dr. King preached in December of 1965 entitled Peace on Earth. And despite its title, he wrestled with the reality of the conflict in Vietnam during that time, and what would Jesus say about that type of conflict, that despite the Civil Rights Act passing in the year 1965, that there were so many men who were being drafted and deployed into a conflict with which Dr. King felt Jesus himself would have taken issue in terms of the morality of it. I find myself looking at the state of our world, and as someone who cares about humankind, as someone who deeply cares about people, I find myself led to the wisdom literature of the book of Job. And in reading the book of Job in its entirety over the course of my life, and certainly over the course of my ministry, I find myself drawn to a chapter that may seem, for Christmas time, unfitting. But for this particular year, for this particular time, I find it to be most appropriate. I would like to read the 10th chapter of the book of Job. But as I read this 10th chapter, I want to draw our attention to the 12th verse and just take a moment to reflect upon that 12th verse. The book of Job itself is a post-exilic book written after the Babylonian exile. And the general reason for this book being written, it's predicated upon this one simple question. Do good people suffer undeservedly? Undeservingly, do good people hurt? And why? Why do good people hurt in a world that is created by a loving God? Where is God when we hurt and are in despair? So with that question, I want to read this chapter. And as I said, draw our attention to the 12th verse and reflect upon that in light of this Christmas season. Verse 1 reads, I loathe my life. I will give free utterance to my complaint. I will speak in the bitterness of my soul. I will say to God, do not condemn me. Let me know why you contend against me. Does it seem good to you to oppress, to despise the work of your hands and favor the schemes of the wicked? Do you have eyes of flesh? Do you see as humans see? Are your days like the days of mortals, or your years like human years, that you seek out my iniquity and search for my sin? Although you know that I am not guilty, and there is no one to deliver out of your hand. Your hands fashioned and made me, and now you turn and destroy me. Remember that you fashioned me like clay. And will you turn me to dust again? Do you not pour me out like milk and curdle me like cheese? You clothed me with skin and flesh and knit me together with bones and sinews. You have granted me life and steadfast love, and your care has preserved my spirit. Yet these things you hid in your heart. I know that this was your purpose. If I sin, you watch me, and do not acquit me of my iniquity. If I am wicked, woe to me. If I am righteous, I cannot lift up my head, for I am filled with disgrace and look upon my affliction. Bold as a lion, you hunt me. You repeat your exploits against me. You renew your witnesses against me and increase your vexation toward me. You bring fresh troops against me. Why did you bring me forth from the womb? Would that I had died before any eye had seen me, and were as though I had not been carried from the womb to the grave. Are not the days of my life few? Let me alone that I may find a little comfort, before I go never to return, to the land of gloom and deep darkness, the land of gloom and chaos where light is like darkness. Job, in the depth of his despair, questioning why God would take him through a year of a pandemic, why God would bring him through a year of unemployment or underemployment, why God would bring him through a year of ventilators and respirators, why God would bring him through a year of police brutality, mistreatment, and injustice, why God would bring him through a year of questioning how will food get on the table, how will medicine be provided, where will my help come from, where will my shelter come from? And a year of floods and storms and windstorms and hurricanes. Where is God? And yet we find in verse 12, you have granted me life and steadfast love, and your care has preserved my spirit. You have granted me life and steadfast love, and your care has preserved my spirit. Job, in the midst of the courtroom drama that is the book of Job, in which God is a defendant And Job, the innocent, is also acting as prosecutor, in which he is inviting all of humankind to engage in a type of cosmic class action suit against an omnipotent God who he feels is absent in the midst of his pain and despair. Job still is reminded and says, "Yet you have given me life and steadfast love, and you've preserved my spirit." Job is saying, I'm only able to complain because you make me able to complain. You allow me to still be able to complain. You allow me enough power and strength to use my voice. You love me enough that I'm still here. You love me enough that I still endure through all of this. You have preserved me. Beloved, by no means do I believe that God will preserve everyone on this side of mortality. God preserves us in different ways, preserves us at different times. Yet preserved we are. Redeemed we are. Saved we are. Even in danger, and I know this is a paradox, but even in danger, safe we are. It is better to be endangered by the world and know God than to feel remotely safe and not have the comfort of knowing that within us is a grace, a stillness, and a peace that if necessary we can walk through fire and not be burned. That if necessary we can die with dignity and courage. That if necessary we have a strength inside of us that we can muster up, that we can lead our families, our communities, and move forward no matter what. God has given us life and steadfast love, unmovable, immovable, unshakable love, eternal love, and preserved our spirit. And after all, that is who Jesus is. Jesus is God's eternal comment on human suffering. God says, I understand how you hurt. I walk with you. I understand how you bleed. I bleed like you. I understand how you cry. I shed tears like you. I hurt like you. Because sometimes just the very nature of life brings pain. And yet pain is not the end of us. God's love is steadfast. God's love is steadfast. Hence, we are capable of loving one another steadfastly. It is the role of a prophet, and prophets throughout the Old and New Testament had the task of reminding the people of God's steadfast love. The prophets throughout the ages reminded all of God's people, though you may be in exile, you are loved. Though you may be in Egypt, you are loved. Though you may face the might of empires and the injustice and the unfairness of a world that does not understand you, God understands and loves you. You are not alone. Endure with the Lord. Endure with Him. Strive with Him. Struggle with the Lord. Strive with the Lord. Struggle with the eternal. Wrestle with the eternal. For Jesus is God's love encased in flesh for us, to demonstrate to us that the fleeting glamour and the fleeting things of this world that seem so important are unimportant. What is important is that we endure. What is important is that we love one another. What is important is that with faithfulness, we know that it is better to be good than to be evil. to love rather than to murder, to say helpful things and hopeful things and constructive things, to be a reflection of the God who created us. That even when times are difficult and God seems far, God is not far from us. The Lord knows you hurt. The Lord knows your pain. Whoever you are, wherever you are. And God also knows your future. That your hurt and your pain will not be the end of you. So we thank God for prophetic words and wise words of wisdom, of power. We thank God for a word that commemorates overcoming, survival, and endurance. Eternal God, we thank you during this season. As we're reminded that through the ages you sent us prophets. Whether it was Moses who established the law firmly in the hearts of your people, or whether it was Samuel called to anoint kings who would lead your people, or whether it was Isaiah and Jeremiah called to reproof the wickedness of nations, or whether it was Micah and Zechariah who prophesied of your arrival, whether it was John the Baptist so committed to righteousness that he was willing to give his life, that he served as your forerunner. So Lord, as your prophets throughout the ages have spoken hope and life and sought to guide us, that we would be who we are supposed to be, and speak as you call us to speak, and stand as you call us to stand, having no fear. God, in this season, as we reflect upon the depth of your love for us, that you sent us your only Son, who was an infant, could already see the suffering and the pain and the anguish that he would endure. Jesus, you already knew what you would endure for us. And yet for us, you walked this earth. For us, you were spit upon, beaten, abused, talked about and scorned, flogged, tortured, and crucified. That you would conquer death. That you would secure for us that which we could not grant for ourselves, eternal life. God, we shall never be worthy of what you did, but strengthen us to be obedient, that we may in time grow to be the people that you've called us to be. Lord, we pray that this world turns away from greed and malice and murder and spite and hatred, and that humankind, every man, woman, and child, every human being, from the depths of their hearts, would be committed to the right treatment and the good treatment and the flourishing treatment of other human beings. May there be peace on earth. May there be peace. God, you give us life, and your love is steadfast, and you preserve our spirit. Continue to give us life and life everlasting. Lord, continue to love us steadfastly and preserve our spirit. Preserve the work of our hands, that it may be found holy and righteous. Happy Christmas. And may we always remember that there is no greater gift than the gift that God gave us, his Son. His Son who gave us and gave up his life. Be blessed. Be encouraged. May the love of God strengthen you.